The wind howled like a banshee, whipping around the old lighthouse and sending waves crashing against the jagged rocks below. Rain lashed against the windows, blurring the lights of the small town huddled in the distance. Inside the lighthouse, dust motes danced in the weak beam of the lone lantern as 4 researchers huddled around a table. They were there to solve the mystery of the missing lighthouse keeper, a man who had vanished without a trace 40 years ago. Dr. Amelia Croft, a historian specializing in maritime law, pushed a strand of wet hair behind her ear and consulted her notes. Beside her sat Dr. James Heller, an expert in the paranormal, his face pale in the flickering lamplight. Across from them, Michael Vargas, a retired police officer with a gruff exterior and a keen eye for detail, tapped his foot impatiently. And rounding out the group was Sarah Chen, a young, eager photographer whose camera was never far from her side. "So we're all agreed then," Amelia began, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "We came here to uncover the truth about what happened to Thomas Wakeham, the former keeper of this light." "And we'll find it," James added, his gaze fixed on the swirling storm outside. "Even if this place is one of the most haunted lighthouses in the world, there is always a rational explanation to be found." Michael snorted derisively. "Yeah, right. I've seen enough ghost stories to last a lifetime. There's nothing rational about ghosts." But Sarah spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "Why are we here if we don't believe the same thing can happen?" Her question hung in the air, unanswered. No one could explain why they had all come to this forsaken place on this forsaken night. Perhaps it was the lure of the unknown, the promise of adventure. Or maybe, just maybe, they had all secretly hoped to find evidence of the supernatural. A sudden gust of wind slammed against the lighthouse, shaking its foundations. A floorboard creaked ominously above them. James Heller jumped, his eyes wide with alarm. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his hand outstretched toward the others as if seeking support. "It's probably just the wind," Amelia said soothingly, though her own heart was pounding in her chest. They had explored the top 2 floors of the lighthouse already, finding nothing more than cobwebs and memories. But the basement remained unexplored, its heavy wooden door locked and bolted from the outside. According to local legend, that was where the ghosts congregated, where the spirits of the past made their presence felt most keenly. As the storm raged outside, they made their way down the narrow stairs, each step groaning under their weight. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a dank, musty chamber lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room stood the massive iron safe, its surface covered in grime and rust. Michael Vargas stepped forward and examined it closely. "Looks like it's locked tight," he muttered. "But let's see if we can pry it open anyway." He struggled with the heavy safe for several minutes, but it didn't budge. Just as he was about to give up, James Heller noticed a small keyhole hidden in a corner. "Could this be it?" he asked, reaching for the weathered key hanging from his keychain. It fit perfectly. The safe creaked open, revealing rows upon rows of yellow documents and a small leather-bound journal. As Michael pulled out the journal, a sudden gust of wind slammed against the lighthouse, causing the single bulb to flicker and die, plunging them into darkness. In the sudden blackness, Amelia heard a scream, a woman's voice echoing through the chamber. Then silence. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, another gust of wind tore through the lighthouse, extinguishing the lantern on the stairs and sending a wave of icy cold air rolling down the shaft. "I think we need to get out of here," Michael said, his voice tight with urgency. They stumbled toward the stairs, groping for the wall to steady themselves. At the top of the stairs, they paused, listening intently. The only sound was the wind and the rain. "Maybe it's just the storm," James said. Though his voice lacked conviction, they continued on, emerging into the relative safety of the main room. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the grimy windows, They saw something that made them freeze in their tracks. Footprints. They were small, almost dainty, and covered in dust, as though they had been made by someone wearing leather slippers. But how could that be? They were on the 3rd floor, cut off from the rest of the house, and they had seen no one. Cautiously, they followed the footprints which led to the door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, and as they pushed it open, they gasped. Before them lay a long, narrow passageway shrouded in darkness. At the end of the passage, a faint light flickered, beckoning them forward. As they stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind them, plunging them into total darkness. Amelia cried out, her hand flying to her mouth. She could feel the eyes of the others on her, their faces pale and drawn in the gloom. Then James Heller spoke, his voice unnaturally calm. "It looks like we're not alone." A raspy whisper seemed to emanate from the very walls of the lighthouse, growing louder until it was clear that it wasn't coming from any person they knew. "Get away!" it hissed. "Get away from here!" Amelia felt a cold hand grip her shoulder, and she screamed, stumbling backward into the darkness. She could hear the others gasping as unseen footsteps echoed around them. "Run!" a voice called out, and this time they could tell it was male. "Run while you still can." But where could they run? The door was locked and bolted, and there was no other way out. Trapped, they huddled together as the footsteps drew closer, their whispers growing louder. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. An eerie silence descended, broken only by their ragged breathing. With shaking hands, Michael began to search for the lock, his fingers working frantically. "It's no use," he said at last, his voice strained. "It's locked from the outside." Just then, Sarah Chen cried out, pointing to the floor. Etched into the dusty ground was a circle, and within it a spiral pattern that seemed to writhe and twist before their eyes. "What does it mean?" James Heller whispered, his eyes wide with fear. As if in answer, the circle began to glow with an otherworldly light, growing brighter and brighter until it was blinding. When the researchers could see again, they found themselves in the middle of the spiral, surrounded by a thick fog that seemed to seep into their bones. And then they saw them, the spirits of the lighthouse gathered in a circle around them. There were men and women, young and old, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. At their head stood a tall, imposing figure, his face hidden in the shadows. He raised a hand, and the researchers felt a searing pain, as if every bone in their body were being broken and put back together. The tall figure stepped forward, his voice booming, echoing through the chamber. "Who are you?" he demanded, "and what are you doing here?" Amelia Croft took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I must speak to the keeper of this light. I have questions that only he can answer." The tall figure hesitated, then turned and beckoned with a finger. The researchers were led deeper into the fog, the spirits parting before them like a thick, swirling mist. Then the figure turned back, his face illuminated by a flash of lightning. It was the face of the missing lighthouse keeper, twisted in a mask of rage and sorrow. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice a hollow echo. "This place is cursed. No one can escape the curse of Black Rock Light." With that, he vanished, leaving the researchers in the grip of the swirling mist and the company of the ghosts of Black Rock Light. Their screams echoed through the lonely lighthouse, swallowed by the darkness and the storm. No one would hear their cries for help. They were trapped forever in the heart of the lighthouse, doomed to wander its endless halls and search for the elusive keeper, the keeper who held the key to their escape, or perhaps the key to their doom.